Pranshu, I hope I'm audible.
Ashik, where are you based?
I'm based out of Delhi, Pranshu, yes.
Okay. Just start. It will take a couple of more minutes and then we start.
No worries.
इसके बाद बताइए बंद कर दीजिए. Hi, Professor Veena. Can you hear us well?
Yes, I can. Thank you, Pranshu.
Okay.
I'm
Good.
certainly
Nice
very
to
happy
see
to be-
you again.
good to see you too, and nice to meet you both, Pranshu and Kaushik. So, yeah, thank you for the invitation
Same here,
to.
Veena.
You are in Australia right now?
Yes, in Sydney. That's right.
Okay.
Yes, that's right. Well, I'm glad to hear that you can hear me, so that's good.
Yeah, hear you very well.
Yeah,
Timing
excellent.
is not very off for you, I believe. It's
Oh,
okay.
it's not that late. It's only 7:30 in the night, so all
Yeah.
all good. Yes. And I guess where are you all based out of India?
Yeah, so me and Kaushik both are in Delhi NCR. So I'm in Gurgaon. He's in Delhi.
Mhm.
So maybe let's start. I think we waited for a few minutes. So greetings everyone. We will initiate the discussion for today, and it's a delight to actually host this webinar on the World Environment Day. Let me start with the first message that I get in my, let's say, environment peer group. If anyone comes and says, if anyone writes to you to save the planet or anything, just tell them, no, we don't need to save the earth, we need to save ourselves as a species. So, it's not about a planetary system. We are systematically all the. I'll just change my network just a second, please.
Yes, Pranshu, I'm not sure if it was an issue on my side. We were not able to hear you properly.
Yeah, sorry, there was a network issue at my end. I hope I'm being heard well now. So, that was the first thing. And then there was a whole debate how, everyone is wanting to save instead of, thinking, how do I protect myself? And how do I protect our species? So, if anyone writes to you the theme, if you look at the theme of Save the Planet, of this World Environment Day, which is inspired by nature, actually, it is essentially talking about the same thing, that if we as a species were to follow the basic tenets of how all other species are behaving and how nature works, then we would never be even having this webinar, because there would be no waste to talk about, there would be no challenges, because not almost all other species have found a way to just not cause any challenges in the very basic systems in which they live. So with that, I'd love to welcome Professor Veena and Kaushik to this webinar. Thank you for taking your time. Just to share a bit about the webinar series, annually for the last 5 years, Karo Sambhav is doing series of webinars. The focus of these webinars has been to put light on circular economy as such. And what does it mean? And while there are topics which get repeated time and again, the issue remains the same. While there is a lot of dialogue on circular economy, the impact is yet to be felt. The changes are yet to be seen. So while there has been I would say, good amount of dialogue, the deep transition which needs to happen has not happened, and it's not even visible that it is going to happen very soon. So at one end we are seeing climate crisis going by the day. We look at any of the living indices, they are deeply challenged. But the urgency is only in dialogue. We are not seeing it in action. So how do we, feel that it is going for the audience? While a lot of the webinars that we do may sound repetitive, but the whole idea is how do we push, how do we nudge, how do we reach that space where change and action happens? So let me just also I'll tell you a bit about, so we will be doing 8 webinars in this whole series. So in this annual year, the focus will be circular economy, and the format would be, we may have a couple of speakers, we may have a single speaker. So we are trying multiple formats. So people who have been repeatedly participating in these webinars, there may be certain changes in the way we are doing it. The webinar series is sponsored by a few organizations, namely Apple, Dell Technologies, Canon, Cisco, and Nothing. And the objective of this webinar is essentially to initiate dialogue, which will hopefully bring in some change. So with this, let me start with Kaushik. So Kaushik, you have been working on marine litter for a while, and while our focus is largely on electronic waste, a lot of waste also ends up being dispersed in the environment. So, or let me, for the audience, let me just introduce Kaushik Chandrasekhar. So Kaushik is has very deep experience of over 15 years in resource efficiency and solid waste management. He is currently working at the India Country Office of United Nations Environment Program to happen and has worked in the past with organizations like TERI and Ernst & Young. His deep expertise lies in plastic waste management, organic waste management, co-processing, waste to energy, and again has spent very good amount of time working with many stakeholders in the system. So Kaushik, before so I'll now like to bring you into the discussion, and if you could start with some of your thoughts from a World Environment Day perspective first, and then we go into the whole idea of the theme of this year, inspired by nature. So let's start with that and then we build.
So I hope I'm audible, Pranshu. Just wanted to firstly thank you, for having me as part of this panel. And I think this year's World Environment Day theme is very, very timely, Pranshu, if I have to say, because it kind of puts the climate agenda right at the center. We are already, kind of experiencing these extreme climate events, like you mentioned in your address. Be it rising temperatures, be it, intense rainfalls, be it sometimes, drought-like situations happening at the same time in the country. But in a way, you see that these are kind of small signals given to us by Earth. I feel that, these are messages given out that, climate change is, of course, happening. But I think the larger message being sent out is that we need to act now, and that we need to kind of act evenly across sectors, right? So that is where I feel the theme is kind of asking us to do, a lot of things parallelly. One of the things that I feel that the World Environment Day theme is kind of also looking at is to ask us to kind of think differently about the way we are living, the way we are kind of producing as well as consuming, right? So very often we think that, we have an environmental impact only when you see waste kind of lying on the road, or maybe, pollution is in the river, or maybe you find smoke up in the air. But actually it has to, seep in that every action that we take kind of has an environmental footprint. And even if it is something that is, very invisible in nature, for example, like sending out data or maybe using artificial intelligence, right? All of this, even AI is kind of associated with a lot of energy and water footprint. So I think the point here is not to kind of stop using these
at one end we are
facilities
seeing
that we have in hand, or even stop using technology. But the point is to become more impact free, right? So there's going to be an impact for everything that we are working with. I think the same actually holds good with waste and circular economy as well. If you kind of look at a plastic bottle or an MLP sachet which is lying on the road, it's not something that is at the end of life. There's a lot of footprint that has actually gone behind kind of manufacturing it, right from the stage of extraction, getting it into use, getting it transported, collection, recycling, and of course, ensuring that it's scientifically disposed. So the response to this kind of an issue cannot be how do we just collect it and ensure it's recycled. The better question would be rather how do we reduce the footprint across the complete life cycle that we can kind of look at, ensure better design, not to kind of stop using these
at one end we are seeing
that we have in hand, or ensure that stop using technology. But so that also in a way ensuring that reuse can actually happen, and also talk of say stronger recovery systems. This is where I feel circular economy has kind of meets this climate action that we just spoke of. It kind of helps us look beyond the waste bin that we generally associate with very very often, and also understand the kind of materials that actually go into manufacturing of these waste materials that we find there. That is why I feel this year's theme is very, very important. It is kind of asking us to connect all of these dots. If I can quote, the words of the executive director, Inger Anderson, she mentions that, this is the platform World Environment Day kind of assumes and, gives us the platform to kind of bring all the action together to address this climate crisis. Importantly, I must say that, she connects 4 broad transitions. One is moving away from fossil fuels. Number 2, restoring degradation. Number 3, reducing pollution. And number 4, advancing the right to a healthy environment. And for me personally, this framing is very, very useful because it reminds us that climate change and biodiversity loss and pollution are problems which are so closely interlinked, and they cannot be looked at in separate silos. And this is where I feel, in short, the theme is asking us to do, number 1, stop working in silos and kind of think that this is either an energy problem or a waste problem. It's all going to be an interlinked solution that we have to be looking at. Number 2, it's asking us to move from awareness that we already have towards implementation. We know that there is a problem, and in many cases, we also know what the solution is. So the real challenge is kind of getting these solutions implemented on ground and at scale. And, when we start working at cities and industries and, many of these institutions to get these solutions on ground. Number 3, I feel it's asking us to kind of ensure that, we look at consequences of the systems that we are putting in place currently. Because when the theme says for our future, it says that, we can't keep creating systems that generate more waste or more pollution or, have more, impact on the natural resources. And then we call it development. So the real test, I feel, Pranshu, is whether the choices that we make are going to reduce the burden for the generation to come. I'll stop here, Pranshu.
No, thank you. Thank you for your opening remarks. And you know what, the core thing, I think, which, when I first looked at the theme, it is essentially going to the core issue, of design. Almost all of failings are happening because the product designs, the system design is not functioning. Waste is essentially a design problem. And even if we talk of systems like EPR, while they have given results on the recycling side, they have dramatically failed on the design side. This is something what Thomas also writes. Thomas Linkovic, who is who coined that term extended producer responsibility, talks extensively about it. Then the kind of results that were imagined right in the beginning, that EPR will bring a push both to end of life problem, but also to at the design stage, because it will create financial incentives for people to change. That has largely not happened, and not happened not just in India, but in most parts of the world. We still see very large, systems which are generating waste. We are not seeing waste being reduced systematically because of EPR based sort of systems. What if we were to talk of circular economy, actually now circularity is also circular crisis, or if we were to talk of climate crisis, has also become a material crisis. I mean, there may be geopolitical reasons, and hence, at least in the last 1 year, if I were to look at last year versus this year, there's a lot more dialogue happening on how do we drive material circularity. So not necessarily at a product lifetime extension, but how do we really look at, and this is becoming more strategic with a very strong focus on critical raw materials. So government has launched a range of missions. The story is being written now. What outcome will come, we don't know, but at least that dialogue is starting. Which was missing a year and a half back. So the core focus is now moving from a broad dialogue on circular economy to a materials related dialogue. And again, for me, it goes back to design. How do we look at our design of products, our fundamental rethinking these systems of production, because unless we sort that out, you're never going to get these materials back. So with this, let me introduce Professor Sehajwala to all of you. I don't think she needs any introduction, but let me still introduce her to the group. So she is the founding director of the Center for Sustainable Materials Research and Technology at UNSW Sydney. She is a leading expert in recycling science. I've had a couple of interactions with her in the past. Her most famously known initiative is around the e-waste microfactory. That's when I got to know her first. And her whole work has been about transforming waste into innovative green materials. So she also leads the ARC Industrial Transformation Research Hub for Green Manufacturing, driving industry-focused sustainability research. So welcome to this session, Professor Sehajwala. And if you have any opening remarks, please.
Thank you. Thanks, Pranshu. And it was really lovely to hear what you had to say, Kaushik. Really do agree with you wholeheartedly that, we have to be able to look at everything we do on this planet in a holistic way. So it's addressing the needs of society, but also how do we do it in a way that is fair and equitable, so that everybody then has got access to homes. And it's not about, the ones who can afford to, I guess, pay for things, or those that can afford to take things for granted. I think we all can take a sense of responsibility across the board, that if we can lower our consumption, when we're talking about materials crisis, if we can lower our consumption in the first instance, then of course that is such an important point to reflect on, because I think it all has to start ultimately in our own local context. So literally in our own homes, in our communities, and I think of course for us to be able to yes, go from the conversation and the awareness raising into action. And therefore, what can we do as individuals? I mean, one of the obvious ones to ask would be consumption of textiles and clothing and all of these items. So, why would we not kind of challenge ourselves to think that ultimately, industries where we can afford to lower our individual consumption and the impact that we can have by, kind of maybe not just talking about what why it matters, but also equally importantly, what role can we all play? And to me, in that regard, the example that I can pick up on, and I'll use this green ceramic tile as an example. The fact that this has got these blue colors, these colors have actually come from textile waste. So another example here, this green ceramic tile has also got textile waste, and all of these have got a combination of glass and textile. Why am I talking about it in the context of textiles is because ultimately what we're showing is, yes, we have to worry about our consumption, absolutely, at the front end. And of course, when materials do reach the end of life, it's saying that could that then serve as a raw material for starting its life in a different form? So could that waste textile not be seen as a waste, but could it become a raw material for making these green ceramic tiles, for instance? And that's exactly what we have proven, that you can actually put these materials into production. And indeed, our microfactory in Sydney is doing exactly that. We're making these green ceramic tiles. They are meeting expectations in terms of performance, because of course it's no point talking about manufacturing and remanufacturing and not having the right kind of performance guarantees and requirements. So in all of this, again, it's that important question of how humanity is able to meet the needs of everyone, and this is where, of course, the question of equity comes in. So the fact that in our case, we're talking about, doing this in our local, municipal corporations. So that's in Australia, it's called local councils, local governments. Same notion, whether you're in India or in Australia, looking at it in a local context, there is no reason why you shouldn't be able to engage in that local context. Because of course, when we talk about what do we do with these end of life resources, it's no point sort of saying, well, it's got to be transported over long distances, because you're again wasting a lot of energy in doing so. So in every aspect, in a holistic way, we need to think about these are resources, they're raw materials. So in this case, we're talking about combination of waste glass and waste textiles. And the fact that we can convert these into these green ceramic floor tiles, which we can demonstrate that we can do it in fit for purpose microfactories, means you can imagine that these kinds of decentralized solutions could well be deployed anywhere in the world. But the reason why you would do that is because they would meet the needs of your local communities, and therefore enabling everyone to have access to, for instance, in your home, if you needed flooring and walling and such applications. But the fact that you could do it in a local system where you're creating local jobs, allows us to meet both of those requirements. One is the obvious environmental solution, keeping waste out of landfill, and obviously not wasting all of that energy that went into making the products in the first place. So hence the connectivity with, lowering our materials footprint. We talk about carbon footprint, but let's talk about lowering our materials footprint, because if these materials can be put back into our economy, and talking about remanufacturing is enabling us to say the materials that were made once can be put back into remanufacturing. So yes, indeed, in your local community or your local region, you can create these products. But you might say, well, not everywhere you will have access to enough waste glass. So, are there things we could be doing that are a little bit different? So let me put up this example. Here is an example of something that is made out of waste wood. And this has got basically what we call our hybrid panels, and something that Kaushik, you might be interested in. This is made out of ghost nets or fishing nets, and these fishing nets are, of course, again, plastics, right? So when we talk about plastics, we have to understand that they present themselves in many different forms, whether they are waste that are present, that land on our beaches or in our communities or in our waste cars, or indeed e-waste. We have to say, well, there are many different types of plastics that are used in our ecosystem. So an example of what we have done looking beyond these building products is if I come to plastics that are present in our e-waste, we've actually shown with our industry partner Renew IT that we can make these plastic filaments. You can see these thin plastic filaments that are made from 100% recycled and remanufactured e-waste plastics. So this is an example of how a material that might have been destined for landfill can now be put back into remanufacturing. And now once you've done that, you can feed that into 3D printing. So you're basically, starting to think about the fact that even at the granular level, when we talk about plastics, there are many different kinds of plastics. And you can't just say it's one size fits all. So I think it's important to start to recognize that when we talk about plastics or glass, and as we all know, even there are different kinds of glass, the ones that are used for domestic consumption, very different to what's there, for example, in our cars, in our furniture. So if in all of these cases we've got access to all these different kinds of materials, then we can lower our materials footprint if we can take the point, and the point you were making earlier, Pranshu, that, we learn from nature. And if we're learning from nature, and if Mother Nature is saying there's no such thing as a waste, and if at the end of life for one product, if we're going to put that back into production again and again, then we are demonstrating that we need to be able to bring in the science of materials coupled with technological advances. So if all of these technologies could be deployed, but it's important to recognize that they've got to be done at fit for purpose scale. So you can't be transporting and saying everything has to make money only if it is built on the principle of economies of scale. What we're talking about here is you don't always have to have economies of scale. You can actually work around the principles of economies of purpose. So then the question is, okay, what do we mean by economies of purpose? What we mean is if we're going to deliver societal benefits and consider each of these different material elements that are destined for a particular purpose. We do make copper for obvious reasons for a given purpose. They're what's used in, of course, electronics and electrical applications. We make steel for a different purpose. They're made for our buildings and so on. So I think we have to be able to recognize that in all of these cases, if what is available in the form of scrap has to become part of our remanufacturing ecosystem, we have to be able to demonstrate that it can be coupled with fit for purpose technologies. And the minute you do that and you attribute value to that end of life material, now it is no longer a waste. It is actually a valuable resource. It's a valuable raw material, just like metal scrap. Metal scrap, we know, whether it is copper, steel, aluminium, metal scrap is worth a lot. But when you've got materials, and I think, Kaushik, you were talking about, if I understood, multi-layer packaging that you were referring to in packaging senses. If you've got something that is multi-layered, for example, aluminium, we're doing some work in that area. What do you do with the fact that there might be a coating that is applied on the metallic material? So we've got a polymer coating. We now want to be able to use that aluminium back over and over again. So we need technologies that allow us to regenerate clean and green metals. So it doesn't matter whether we're talking about metals, plastics, and I've used examples of ceramics as well with our green ceramic tiles. They all are produced, designed to be fit for purpose. So I do agree that in consideration of materials design, we've got to think about how at the end of its life, it's going to go right back into remanufacturing. So a lot of people ask us, hey, you guys are doing these micro factories, making these, green ceramic tiles. What happens when these tiles break? What we say is we can put them right back into remanufacturing in our own micro factory. And this is where, of course, if we want to be able to look at how that is feasible, we need to understand how fundamentally remanufacturing has to actually change to accommodate the fact that end of life plastic, like something that can go into, filaments for 3D printing, could be put back into remanufacturing. So if we can kind of, throw consideration also to our thinking upfront that design is not just about what a material looks like aesthetically. Yes, it's nice to have all the fabulous aesthetics. But I think you almost have to ask, are we as human beings in pursuit of perfection, forgetting the fact that, kind of perfection is the enemy of good. If
Yeah.
something is good enough, it meets the performance guarantees. Do we need everything? If we're going to make these floor tiles, people often ask us, oh, can it be this perfect color and can it be this? And I go, well, why do we need floor tiles to be of a perfect color? Don't they have to be performing to the engineering specifications? They have to have the strength. They have to have the right kind of anti-slip properties. Do they have to be perfect? Probably not. Can we live with colors of our floors and walls and all of that? It was really lovely where somebody asked us the other day when we were showing these tiles and going, oh, these are beautiful colors. How do you add color into this? And our answer is that, well, we actually get colors out of the waste textiles. So it's really nice that we can actually start to see, how design in what we talk about for humanity can actually serve a purpose where we can all say that our five fingers are not the same. We don't need to be perfect. In fact, when we started making these floor tiles, what was quite interesting was we were getting really performance in terms of strength, for example, much better than what standard products were offering. So it's also interesting, again, to challenge the notion when people say, well, it's a waste, therefore it's not going to be good enough. And actually, I would probably challenge that as well, that what we're seeing is the performance is actually, in many instances, better than standard products can offer. So,
Thank you, Professor Sahajwala. I think this is a very good initiation to building this dialogue. I think one of the fundamental shifts that I'm also seeing, like, 2 decades before, when we were celebrating World Environment Day, it used to be about let's plant a tree, it was still very colloquial, still very, okay, kuch kar lete hain, chalo aaj kuch, Paryavaran Divas hai, kuch kar lete hain, to now talking deep tech in some ways, to now talking material science, to now rethinking systems of, how are we, even changing societal expectations, because the points that you just made are going deep into what do we expect as an individual, as a community, as a society, as a nation, and what are the boundaries of this? And are these boundaries just too much of conditioning because of marketing that has happened? And do we need to redo these things? Because even on a performance analysis, do we really need that sort of a performance? So functionality, which has been the core of defining a product, that has long been forgotten. It is so much more about touch and feel and looks and everything. And functionality has kind of taken a backseat. Maybe almost all products do the same functionality and you don't need to load it with so many things. But thank you for getting us started in that direction, because that is, I think, what we need. How do we really rethink the very basis of every decision making? And the very basis is the key. I mean, we can't, I have been in dialogues with organizations where it is, give me to this spec and this and that and that and that. Well, is that the need really? Do we even, so that questioning is still not happening. And the moment we, let's say, focus on this term, remanufacturing is the key, material circulation is the key, the change will probably happen. So thank you for getting started on that. Kaushik, just like to build, so you have been doing a lot of work in this space. Do you want to talk about certain points that you would like all of us to pick? And again, we have varied audience here. Not everyone is coming from a deep environmental background or a material science background, but certain things, that you would say, from a UNEP point of view, or from all the work that you have done, that at least these things are things that, we must take. And things that ideally we should also question, because I think we are not questioning what we are consuming. Why, again, as environmentalists, we may be debating a lot of these things, but how do they go and become a part of regular dialogue of ours.
Sure, Pranchu. I think this is in terms of reflecting on how we've kind of looked at circular economy per se in India. There is a lot of emphasis on the downstream, if I may say, that this and many at times there's this misconception of recycling being completely replaced by circular economy, right? So I also wanted to kind of emphasize here that while recycling is very, very important, getting waste into the thick of things in terms of getting re-entering into the manufacturing bit is very, very important. I feel circular economy can't kind of look at the downstream itself. And what I feel is that we have to start focusing on going one step earlier and see that if this waste could have been avoided, could it have been reduced in the first place? Maybe there was a better design to kind of look at in the first place. Maybe for me, I feel that this has to move a little bit upstream. One of the things that I'd like to kind of bring into perspective here is one recent example from Europe, where we kind of saw the example of where they moved from freely moving caps to tethered caps on beverage bottles. It was a small design change, but I think the thinking behind this was very, very important. If you look at these beverage caps, which otherwise would have just been littered, now you find that the cap remains attached to the bottle. So, it's more or less likely to kind of get into the environment, be littered. And it gets collected along with the bottle itself so that they are recycled together. This kind of thought process in terms of ensuring that circular economy is brought into practice from the design stage is where I'm coming from, and it has to be inculcated. Not about asking after you kind of create the litter already entered the environment, now how do we clean up, right? So I think the design phase is the number one and the most important aspect which I'd like to emphasize on. The same idea applies for packaging as well. Dr. Veena spoke of multi-layered plastics. The question is not whether a packet or a bottle can technically be recycled. The question is that packaging necessary at all? Could there have been lesser material that could have been used for packaging the same material which we are trying to give out? Maybe it could have been designed for a better reuse so that it doesn't go out into the environment at all. So these are some questions which are very, very important for us to kind of put into perspective. Again, getting back to that MLP kind of discussion that we were having, one of the major problems is this low value plastic that we are actually having in India right now. So if you have multiple layers of materials that we are kind of dealing with, it becomes often difficult for the recycler to kind of separate them, and it makes it more expensive to kind of recycle these streams of waste, and therefore it doesn't get, there is no intrinsic market value for it, so it doesn't get picked up that frequently. But if the design choices are kind of made in such a way that they are simpler, they are lighter, maybe monolayers, that makes the system all the more work better, while you're ensuring that packaging is also done. Similarly, I could pull this to food waste as well. Composting and biomethanation, all of these are very advanced technologies where we're looking at the downstream management. But the better circular economy question would be, how do we prevent this food waste, in the first place? Because if food is wasted, we're talking of that much, water, that much energy, labor that actually went into kind of manufacturing this, at the first place. So my view is that, in the Indian context, there needs to be that shift as far as circular economy is concerned, right from, looking at this concept as just as a downstream concept, focusing on recycling and end-of-life management. And we need to kind of move this towards, reduction, redesign, reuse, repair, and kind of, even maybe shift to refill. And maybe it would mean that, getting these systems in place like recovery and segregation, of course, very, very important. But I think recycling should be a part of the larger system rather than the whole system itself.
No, very true. So, coming back to you, Professor Sejwala, I understand you wanted to share some slides. Would you like to do that now?
I'm more than happy to leave it if
Rather than the whole system
if there's
itself.
no time. I'm conscious always of the fact that maybe there is
If you want to take 5 to 7 minutes to, because sometimes it just helps to visually see certain things that you want to talk, then please do.
Sure. Look, more than happy to share a couple of slides. So let me see if this will work. I will share this one with you as an example. I think we were talking earlier about one of our examples of our green ceramic tiles. So I'll put up to begin with waste glass, right? So when we talk about, different kinds of glasses, of course, anywhere in the world, whether you're driving in India or in Australia, a lot of these highly engineered products are made, of course, to keep us safe. So, here's a good example of a windscreen glass where it's not your standard glass, of course. It's designed in a way to be laminated. And of course, that's because it keeps us safe in case of an accident when you do damage your windscreen in case of an accident. So let me sort of kind of make that point that there are lots of complex products that, of course, one has to take into consideration that they're highly engineered. But on the other hand, I was talking about waste textiles, and one can also, of course, sort of ask the question, as we were saying before, right up front, in terms of what are some of the kind of sacrifices, if we want to call it that, or questioning our own behavior we can
But
make.
on the other hand,
But certainly what we don't want to see is, so much of these end-of-life materials like textiles going into landfill. But, we do have a choice in terms of, what we consume. But okay, so if you say, right, we are very careful, we've got, we all want to lower our consumption, what would we do in terms of, dealing with these challenges? So look, I probably wanted to just kind of show you these examples so people can see that a little bit more upfront if they didn't get a chance to quite see the small samples that I was holding up. But let me kind of just show you how a lot of these have actually been deployed. So in this particular example, you can see that they've been deployed into flooring. So these are the floor tiles that I was referring to earlier. There's, of course, inside this apartment, you can see being used in kitchens, and you can see them being used in walls. So in all of these cases, it's very much about making that point that when we think about material circularity, and if we could be making all of these products and remanufacturing it, how would we actually start, and where would we start? So if indeed this is what we can demonstrate, that we can successfully put this not just in our homes. So here are some more examples. These kinds of little tiles that you can see, again, 10 by 10, that have gone into a store, for instance. I'm just simply sharing these kind of photos because I think it's important to then recognize that now we're talking about real examples of products that are made, deployed, they function. So I think we were talking earlier about functionality versus aesthetics. They function, and that's kind of really where we should ask the question, are they going to meet the requirements for what we expect? So here's another example if we were making furniture. So, the examples of coffee tables and so on. But then let me move forward furthermore. Have we deployed them in all kinds of remote communities? Here's an example of a remote community in Australia where they were so excited in this home. They wanted us to, trial this. And of course, we trial this is in their kitchen area in one of the remote communities. So the reason why I'm showing all of these examples is, I think if we talk about action, and if we talk about how can we all play a part as communities, the one of the first steps we could all be taking is looking how and of course, it does take literally that effort in communities to be able to show that there is a market for this. So here are more examples where, in fact, in this particular example with a lot of little orange and blue flecks, that was an example of old school uniforms that went into production. So in all these cases, and could we be also, informing and getting young people excited about what this could mean? There are ways in which you can inspire, but get to both, your head and your heart to say, what, as young people, there is hope, and we can't afford to lose hope. That is important. Fact that we're excited about lots of communities. I was referring to local governments. This is something that we're really excited about. So overall, to be able to talk about what's local, it's modular, it's scalable. So I think, just to be able to come right to this, 2 finishing slides, this is the conventional way of thinking. And of course, in circular solutions, it is a complex ecosystem, but we can all play our part. I think Kaushik and you guys talked about repair, reuse, lots and lots of ways in which we can play our part. So I'll stop share and hand it back to you.
Thank you. This was very helpful. And if I were to take this example back home from an e-waste point of view, if we look at the complexity, I think it's one of the most complex.
Now I was talking about waste textiles.
If we start taking simple examples like lighting, and you see the amount of
and one
various
we'll talk about
forms that have emerged in lighting, especially on the LED side, because the traditional lighting has largely gone, and that also is then reflected in the products, the flat screen displays that are out there. And surprisingly, there are no solutions for things like these. Lighting is one of the most difficult and really unsolved problems. So one of the big challenges that we find when we talk of recycling is a whole range of materials. While there is appetite for some consumption, the appetite for large-scale consumption is absent. I think, Professor, you will also be finding that how do you make these products mainstream? And can they actually go and fit into existing ecosystems of production and manufacturing? Can existing systems of manufacturing get converted into, let's say, partially remanufacturing and, so primary material manufacturing plus secondary material? And that shift is very difficult. It is not easy, so much investment has already been made into existing manufacturing ecosystems. But how do you, a tiny spec change kind of upsets the whole system? So,
well, this is where, when I was using this example, you talk about e-waste. So, I refer to these plastic filaments that are made from, old kind of printers and the casings. Now, when you talk about connectivity in the broader sector of electronics and from lights to printers to all kinds of things, there's no reason why an existing manufacturer can't say that the components that I need, if I need a certain kind of plastic to be able to make some, fittings, and if they are made from a particular kind of plastic, there is no reason why I can't go back, look at how I can 3D print, the various sort of attachments and components, and covers. You use LED as an example. That's a good one, Pranchu, because of course, you've got plastics in there. There is no question that is part of the component. But could a manufacturer go, okay, what if I could use recycled plastics coming from a different sector? So in this case, it could be the printers. I can then bring that in as part of remanufacturing, but knowing that I have a choice, so I don't have to always use new materials. I can use recycled, remanufactured. The nice thing is you can then bring along your consumer and your customer on that journey with you. Tell that as part of the story and say, did you know by buying this particular bulb, this LED lighting system or this infrastructure, tell the story that this component or this part has been made out of recycled plastic filaments and for 3D printing and whatever. So I think you also have to get people excited about it. So if you are a manufacturer who's making a product, putting in the effort, then I think the narrative and the story that you can tell of what those components are, that can be as exciting. So the work we do with some of the people here in Australia is, they want to set up an innovation space. They want to be able to have a display center where we want to be able to tell the story of what are some of the raw materials that went in, how was this made. I think you can get people more excited about buying a product because they can see that through their purchases they can
Yeah.
have an impact.
So one of the things that I see, and again, in my own personal experience, is that we are seeing a good adoption of on an innovation side. So, new kind of products with X amount of recycled content, that is starting to happen. But the thing is, how do you make it mainstream? That is still a far away goal. And across sectors, leaving aside simple materials, easy to recycle materials where it's a norm, and it has been a norm not from now. It's not driven by the concern of climate. It has been the norm of industry to use recycled content because the material is simple, like glass, for example, simple float glass. However, the moment we talk of complex materials, that mainstreaming, there are products where you will have some amount of recycled content, but does it become mainstream? And there, I'll go back to, the societal expectations is the issue, or at least that's how marketing people frame it, or sales people. Well, people will not accept this because it may not meet X norm. But who has created these norms, and how do we redo and rewrite these norms, especially on days like today? That we don't need to have that brightest green color, or the tweak and the shine and whatever it is. So Kaushik, I'd like to bring you in, considering you are part of a very large institution. So are you seeing these sort of mainstreaming activities in certain spaces? Like, again, we see it in certain sectors like PET, which are much easier to do because of the kind of materials we are dealing with. But with complex materials, are you seeing that industry shifting tipping points where it moves from being a niche area, a good solution, to really a mainstream thing? And I think we should start really thinking now, where is this tipping point when products move, or the whole system moves from, okay, great idea, good innovation, but this is mainstream, we don't need to even talk about it, this is the norm of the day. So how do we reach that space? So any points from Kaushik, you, and then Professor Tejwala?
Sure, Pranshu. I think a very pertinent point that we should be looking at mainstreaming many of these solutions. Right from for example, we talk of compostable bags that have come in. We're talking of biodegradable bags that are actually making their space through. Now, how do we actually ensure that these are available? First of all, how do we ensure that they're actually technically feasible, right? Now, most of us actually understand that compostable and biodegradable bags actually degrade in the in the open space, but it's very difficult to understand thrive in that market space. Number one, in the specific example, do we have the technical expertise to manage the end of life, right? Or is it going to become another stream of waste that will get mixed, and we have commingled plastics to kind of deal with, right? Number two, do we understand that in terms of the price point, we are actually kind of dealing right there, so that we are able to curb plastics which otherwise are very, very cheap, and you're comparing price points which are almost 3 or 4 times plastics, and how are we kind of attempting to replace. Number 3, I feel, is ensuring that testing systems are in place. Many of these manufacturers, they get their products in. How do they have them certified? Do we have that environment to ensure that testing systems are in place, so that they are certified in time, they get into the market without enough delay, and you have systems in place to ensure that there is no greenwashing happening. Number 4 is ensuring scaling actually happens. Typically in India, we are not talking of a one-type pilot that actually happens in one corner. We have to look at these solutions that can actually impact economies of scale. So do we have that kind of enabling factors to ensure that this can actually happen and support the industry on these lines? So these were some reflections, Pranshu.
No, thank you, Kaushik. And I'd like to also request the audience, in case you have any questions, anything that you'd like us to cover, kindly put them in the chat, and we'll pick it from there. Professor Rajwala, any points from your side on this? Mainstreaming, how do we really, pin it down and move from this? This is great, new innovation, but no, this is mainstream. We don't need to. I mean, how does it become hygiene?
Yeah, look, I mean, let me use our own practical example now, showing that example of our green ceramic tiles, right? You have to be able to imagine that with everything, there's got to be a journey. And like any new technology, there will always be the early adopters and then those that need a little bit of, convincing and all of that. And so, of course, you have to be able to find those early adopters first and foremost, who are willing to, come with you on the journey. And we've been really fortunate, for example, in Sydney here with our green ceramics factory, that our partnership with the local council has led to the point where, telling the story where others are then listening to it and going, yeah, you know what, we want these products. And so to be in that position where many others now, literally, we're getting inundated with the kinds of inquiries and people wanting something similar. It tells you that yes, there is a tipping point, to the way you were referring to it. That there comes a time when people start to see that, but that effort in the early stages is about being able to talk about the narrative. And that's what I was sort of saying earlier, I mean, if the narrative is around, welcoming people to come and have a look. So, we've always got our doors open, people come in, have a look. We have, of course, our own a micro factory at UNSW in Sydney in our basement, which is a demonstration facility. So a lot of people, when they come in and have a look, are really surprised that it may be on a tiny scale, but the products absolutely meet the specifications. And some of those photos that I was sharing in the early days were the ones that were all made in our own micro factory. Now that, our partners in Sydney are manufacturing it, we have an interesting challenge that there is a lot of demand and a lot of people wanting to know and wanting to come and have a look. So I think, to me, it's not just about saying, oh, well, there's just the one thing and this is only one way to do it. Many others in different parts of the country want to be able to do it in their own way. So again, we've got to be prepared for the fact that it may be a countrywide solution, but it's got to be designed in a local context. And I think we need to always remember that there is a local context. Yes, there is the bigger picture of, the country and, of course, the planet as a whole, but you've got to be able to encourage and inspire local businesses, local communities to come on the journey. And that means that it could well be decentralized. So your scale, think about scalability is not just something that is scaling up, but think about scalability as something scaling outwards. So I think the more you can also scale outwards, have more people doing it, you're still achieving scale, but it's not about making one thing bigger and bigger, but it's about having a multiplier effect that the same thing can be deployed and be replicated in other parts of the country. So I think, it's also about, when we talk about what does scale look like, is to be able to not have waste materials being transported, but rather let's do it in a regional, local context and achieve scale that way.
Yeah, I'll just pick up a question which came, and a few questions, but I think one of the questions which has been put is, what role can AI play? And I see a huge role, especially in optimizing these patterns. Where to fit what waste, linkages with manufacturing across the world. Today, it is because the whole, especially for products like electronics, the supply chain is so complex. So even figuring out what goes where, how do you optimize these patterns? Let's say tomorrow we are in a world of remanufacturing, then I think AI could have a fabulous role in just even unraveling these patterns and, creating solutions of what goes where. But any thoughts on, what role can AI play in this sort of optimizing space? So over to any one of you.
Yeah, look, I mean, oh, sorry, Kaushik, go on.
Don't go ahead, Dr. Veena.
So, I mean, it is important that when we talk about the whole of ecosystem and we're talking about our ability to be able to know what's in our resource stream, so for instance, it's not enough to go, oh, well, we just have to collect batteries and we'll be good. But we have to know what are the different kinds of batteries. And if right up front we track, we monitor, we understand the volumes and supply chains, then that encourages everyone in the ecosystem to be able to go, okay, well, now I can use the AI tools to be able to actually have the intelligence and the data to tell me how many different kinds of batteries do I have? And of course, what are the different chemistries if I'm just using that as an example? So I think to me, it's really good that we've got tools and people interested, but you've got to now actually be quite clever in the way you use those tools. So you might say, okay, if I want to keep track of different kinds of batteries, do I need a system, a visual system, for example, that as soon as somebody brings in an old battery, the visual system is able to very quickly take a photo, weigh it, know what kind of battery I have, and then use that as part of the overall system to become part of the supply chain. So in all the tools that we talk about, AI is an enabler. So let's use that enabling system to recognize that there is a lot of diversity in the kinds of products that we use in our everyday lives. If we could actually, right at the source, right up front, know exactly what we're dealing with, whether it is your batteries or we're talking about different kinds of plastics, I think to be able to have systems, whether they are visual systems, systems that monitor weight and the type of different kinds of materials, keeping track of what's coming in right at the source stops us from mixing different kinds of end-of-life materials, and that will add enormous value because then we can have very targeted systems to enable us to encourage more and more of that use of materials that are coming from our end-of-life resources, so they are seen genuinely as resources and not as waste.
Thank you. So, and this also links to the previous question, which is on different types of plastics in electronic waste. And I think one of the biggest challenges that what we have discovered is sorting them out, figuring what is contained in these plastics, because there are so many varieties of, how do I say, mixtures. So
look, I mean, it's all doable. I mean, I was giving you an example of our industry partner here in Australia, Renew IT. We're partnering with them, exactly on a lot of these, questions on, how do you do all of these things? How do you answer these questions? But also, what are you actually kind of grappling with is exactly this, that there are many different kinds of materials. But once you do that, then, of course, to be able to have, as we were saying, that remanufacturing opportunity. In fact, our micro factory is something that they are championing in Australia and indeed globally, including in places like India, where the opportunities to take plastics that are coming from e-waste, for instance, and to put that back into remanufacturing is something that, I'd encourage people to look up Renew IT if anyone's interested, to be able to see, how a lot of these, solutions, are coming to life. So we're really excited that this kind of partnership between researchers and industry is going to ultimately be the way that, we deliver solutions.
Thank you, Professor Ujjwala. Kaushik, any points from your side?
Sorry, just wanted to add to that conversation. One on that, especially on litter monitoring. There have been these very beautiful apps, AI-based models that have actually surfaced, which is kind of looking at different types of waste streams that are making its way into litter, how to ensure that that can be kind of sorted in terms of ensuring garbage vulnerable points are reduced as far as cities are concerned. That is one major application which I see. Number two, of course, like Dr. Veena mentioned, setting up systems relating to sorting of waste, especially when you have different dry waste streams, ensuring that different resins are kind of looked at, monitored, colors, contamination. So all of this would, kind of encompass in terms of having a good AI system in place. Number three, Pranshu, also looking at in terms of micro planning at the ward level. A lot of this AI tools looking at route optimization in terms of collection. To ensure that the carbon footprint in terms of ensuring the best routes are being followed by these trucks to ensure collection actually happens door to door, from primary collection points, from secondary collection points. So all of this is now being automated with the help of AI tools, just so that it will add some value.
Thank you. I think we are also reaching the end of our webinar. So before I, call it, any last words from, Kaushik or Professor Sehajwala? Anything for the audience? I mean, again, from a World Environment Day perspective, any suggestions, anything that you'd like to convey to the people listening to us today?
Well, I hope that people who are listening will kind of maybe look at all of those products in their own homes and kind of really see how they might be able to hopefully inspire people around them and kind of lift and bring the community along to be able to look at how collective action can be championed. I think we can all be champions in our own way. I think that's all it takes. Sometimes it takes one person to kind of be the one who gets everyone else started. So I would say to everyone, why not be that person?
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Pranshu, I think action is the key word, like Dr. Veena mentioned. I think it's time we act now. We have a lot of these, policy frameworks to kind of support us. There are a lot of, guidelines available. The know-how is there, but I think it is the implementation and getting things at scale, especially at the city level, which actually matters. Ensuring that we get to the city, ensure that waste streams are managed, ensure that solutions are made available at scale, affordable, and easy to use. I think that would actually make the change at the end of the day.
Thank you. Let me also add my views to this. So for me, considering our theme is inspired by nature, I just like, if all of us can just imbibe this deeply inside us, deeply. Any action that we do, any product that we buy, any company that we want to follow, is that inspired by nature? I think even if it's just literally imbibe this, a lot of things will just disappear from the way we act, the way we consume, the way we produce. Because you will find, well, majority of them are not inspired by nature. They are not something which are in deep, how do I say, harmony with nature. So the moment we truly imbibe this, the theme of this World Environment Day, I truly believe that there will be a very different sense to our actions. And, the conditioning that we all have gone through with years of, being marketed to, I think that needs to change for this big change to happen. And there are companies, there are organizations who are trying their best things, but again, they find their own limitations that if they introduce a product which is very different, then is the market going to accept it? So I think it's sometimes, we end up putting too much blame on one side or the other, but I think it is all across. And unless we start imbibing this idea of inspired by nature, I truly find it will be a very difficult way forward. So with this, I'll love to, and very delightfully thank you, Professor Sehajwala and Kaushik, for participating in this good, discussion. Hopefully, all of us have, picked up something. It need not be, everything that has been talked here, but something which will allow us to be, inspired to do some things a little bit different from where we were an hour back. So with that, I love to also again thank the sponsors of the program, Apple, Dell, Apple, Dell, Canon, Cisco, and Nothing, who have been a partner to us in sponsoring these dialogues, essentially, creating series which are then put on YouTube, available for people to see for a long term. So thank you, everyone. And lovely talking to you today. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pranshu.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.